Welcome to the Built for Growth podcast. I'm pretty stoked to bring you an episode on nutrition and what real food looks like. Today's guest will be Brian Sandars, a man who at age 30 looked like your standard American. He had begun gaining some weight and having health issues despite eating healthy, and I do that with air quotes, and regularly working out. Now in his 40s, he is lean and muscular without calorie counting. These are changes literally anybody can do, and I believe your body will thank you for it. Brian is the filmmaker behind Food Lies documentary. He is an international speaker and host of Top 5 podcast, Peak Human. He graduated from UCLA with a degree in mechanical engineering. He's also the founder of Sapien Center, a popular health club in Austin, Texas. Brian's main objective is to spread the awareness of regenerative agriculture and increase access to well-raised animal products through his nationwide meat and body care company, Nose to Tail. You will hear in this episode how our ancestors evolved by way of meat consumption. As a matter of fact, more of the common table vegetables that you see today did not exist for our ancestors. So we jump into what we did eat, and not only for survival, but for thriving in our evolution. And hopefully this will give you some food for thought as you pursue your best self. And as always, thanks for listening. Well, Brian, welcome to the Built for Growth podcast. I'm really excited to have you here today because this is my first food and nutrition-based episode, and I couldn't think of a better guest to kind of break the ice for the listeners.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is my favorite topic.
Mine too, actually, which kind of surprises me that I haven't covered this more. So I'm really excited to dive into what you've learned in your research. But I think it's important to start with the backstory. I think I've watched the Food Lies documentary trailer that you have on your Instagram, which I highly suggest. It's at food.lies. Is that correct? Yep. Mm-hmm. So you can go there and check out this trailer. I know that the documentary docu-series, I should say, has yet to be released, but the trailer is epic. So I did learn of your journey a little bit. You know, you were in your 30s, kind of gaining some weight, and I know that your parents passed away tragically from illness. So if you wouldn't mind to kind of fill in the listeners on how you got to where you are and your passion for food and nutrition.
Yeah, this turned into my life's work, really. And I didn't see it coming at all because I grew up as a mechanical engineer and just not caring about health. And I just played sports and I was fine. And then I turned 30 and everything kind of changed. I started gaining weight. I started getting on over-the-counter medications. And you just get the dad bod and you think that's what your life's going to be. And it's kind of just a joke, right? It's like, oh, yeah, you're 30. You can't, you get the dad bod. Your knees hurt, you have all these different problems. And at the same time, I lost both my parents to chronic disease. And they kind of just did the same thing that all Americans do. They actually did a healthy version of the American diet. They were eating the food pyramid. They were doing the whole grains, avoiding red meat, low fat products, doing the whole thing. And they just were slowly getting worse every year. And no one was telling them anything, that there was anything wrong. And I know now they had prediabetes, they had all these other metabolic problems, and the doctor wasn't telling them anything. They're just, everything's fine. It's in normal range. And so huge wake up call. I started cutting out processed foods from my diet. I read a book actually by Mark Sisson, The Primal Blueprint. Mark Sisson's amazing. If anyone doesn't know who he is, he's 71, I think now, just ripped and healthy and just the man. So his book guided me, and I made some simple changes and everything got better. I lost 20, 25 pounds of fat. I didn't even know I had. My whole body composition changed. I got rid of all of my small conditions and medications. And now I'm 41, feeling and looking better than I did when I was 29. And it's just amazing if you just take these small changes and change what you eat, change your lifestyle a little bit, and the big results it can have. So that got me fired up and just changed the course of my life.
So let me dive into what you were eating as opposed to what you eat now. And it seems like you've always been active, which most people, I think, are under the impression that if they eat healthy, and I'm doing air quotes, they eat what they believe is healthy according to the food pyramid and whatnot, and they work out, that they should achieve a level of fitness, which I think this is frustrating for people, to not be able to lose weight or achieve their fitness goals. And I think it's far deeper than just eat healthy and work out, because healthy is open to interpretation, which I think there's so much misinformation about. So at the time, you were quote unquote eating healthy and you were working out, but what did that look like? And what does that look like now?
Yeah. So I was following the food pyramid. I remember very clearly I was making my own meals. I had an engineering job. I'd go to work, I'd bring my lunch to work. I'd get the whole grain bread, turkey sandwich with lettuce and tomato and light mayonnaise. I would make chicken and rice, do everything I was supposed to, avoiding red meat, whole grains, the whole thing. And I was also doing a lot of cardio too. I'm not against cardio. I just don't think it's the most efficient way to do things. And it wasn't really helping my body composition. I mean, I was just getting the dad bod. So I just feel for people, because so many people are trying to do the right thing and they are frustrated because they fail. And I think it's kind of set up to fail in a way where big food, processed foods, they even make consortiums to the Coca-Cola was part of a consortium called the Energy Balance Network. I think it was called Energy Balance something. And they were just trying to push this message that it's all about cutting calories and just working out more, and that anyone should have good health if they just count calories, don't drink, have Coca-Cola, but not too much, have Gatorade, but not too much. And then if you aren't losing weight or you're getting heavier, it's just because it's your fault, and it's because you didn't count calories well enough. And I think this is just insane and wrong, and people need to wake up. And it puts the responsibility away from the big food manufacturers and puts it on you. And I think that that's not correct. I think that most people are trying. They are, doing what they can. They are trying to eat well and they are trying to work out, but they've gotten the wrong advice. So it doesn't work, right? Of course it's going to fail if you're just saying to eat the same bad foods, but eat less of them, right? That doesn't work. It could work for a short time. Of course, anyone has been on a diet knows that you can lose weight by just cutting calories. I'm not debating that. I'm saying that what is actually healthy for the human body, what is thriving versus surviving, what is sustainable. And if you're just eating less of the same bad foods, it's not going to work.
I think that's a really great point. I think of the same bad food and the calorie counting, how that has failed us in the long run. And thinking about the time that it takes, because me as a professional athlete, there are times when I do measure and I make sure that calorically, I'm first of all eating whole foods, but calorically, because I have to bring my weight down in a slow, manageable manner and make sure that I get enough calories. It's also part of it. Make sure I'm not getting too many, but that perfect balance in everything. I have counted calories, and it is incredibly time consuming. But this is because I have to be dialed in as a professional athlete, really to make a certain weight on a scale with a certain lean body mass and not do it wrong. But I would not recommend this style of eating for any person who is just, hey, I just want to feel a little better. I want to lose a couple pounds. I want to look better. Not only is it incredibly time consuming, it's not necessary. I would absolutely never in my regular life count calories, because for the most part, it doesn't work. And especially if those calories are coming from any kind of processed food, because I know that the food industry purposely designs processed foods to be addicting, right? They're coming over from the same people that were designing cigarettes to make them addictive, now are designing our food with addictive properties. So not only are you not getting what you need from a nutritional standpoint, but the food you're consuming is working against you. It's hyper palatable. It goes down in just a couple chews. When we chew our food, I'm sure you know, Brian, there is a more leptin released, right? So we get more of this satiating, full feeling where we feel happy and content with food, which is ultimately what we're seeking, right? For our body to cue us that we've had enough. And when you're eating processed foods, even if it's only at 20% of your diet, that 20%, in my opinion, is and I think scientifically this is also backed, where it's exponentially working against you because it is tricking the body in ways to crave things that otherwise wouldn't happen. This cascade of negative events wouldn't happen inside the body when you're eating things that are whole foods.
Oh, that's completely correct. Anyone who has extra weight, and 90% of people do have extra fat on their body, and it could be visceral fat too, which is even worse, which is inside your body. You can't see it. It's in and around your organs, and you can get a DEXA scan, or some of these different scales can measure visceral fat, but it's super important that you could just want to throw out there that you could be like sort of lean, but still be metabolically damaged.
Yes, these
Countries
men,
like
these
India and China.
usually, yeah, usually these men that have those big bellies, maybe they might have strong, lean legs and strong, lean arms, but this belly, and then they're like, well, my belly's muscle because it's hard, I can kind of, they pound their abs and like, feel it, it's hard. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand that underneath that muscle, that your body has packed all this fat around your organs, which is the least healthy form. So just because if your belly feels firm, but it's expanding, just understand that this is more problematic and something, we could take a deeper look into.
Definitely. Well, that's I was just going to say India and China, because they're very thin as a nation, on the world scale, very thin nations, yet they have the most diabetes. So this is because they have the visceral fat, and being skinny fat is terrible. Even if you'd see these skinny people and they have kind of a little pooch, and that's just a sign of metabolic dysfunction. So definitely check that out and make sure that you're not. You think that you're okay and you're not. And back to the processed foods thing, that's really important. The hyperpalatability thing, it's so huge, right? And people have heard this before, but there's actually a level beyond that I'm really interested in. It's not that they're just hyperpalatable, because I eat hyperpalatable foods. My steak, the steak and eggs I eat is hyperpalatable. It's delicious, right? I can make it so well, medium rare, and I can have truffle salt on it even, and just like this perfect taste. Yet I stop eating when I'm done, when I'm satiated, and I don't have to count calories. I've never counted calories. And what I've learned about the food industry that's even worse than just making things hyperpalatable, because of course, yes, they can put fake flavorings and all these things, and of course it's terrible. But I've realized that they're actually doing something deeper, which is the less nutrition they put in, the less protein and nutrients they put in foods, the more you're going to eat them. So your body knows protein and vitamins and minerals. For all of history, we've sought after foods and gotten protein, vitamins, and minerals from around us, from animals or plants, and it's worked. And so we have these built-in mechanisms in our body that can sense them. And so if you're eating potato chips or any of these processed foods that are devoid of nutrition, it's not just that they're super tasty, they are, but you keep eating them, you never get full. And even if you do get full, 2 hours later, you're going to want more. It's because there's no nutrition. So there's a lot of marketing around health foods, right? This is healthy labels, and they put all these stupid things on the packaging that's health claims, but they have no actual incentive or fiduciary duty or any duty to actually make them healthy. It's actually the opposite. Their fiduciary duty is to make profits for shareholders. So they found out that the less nutrition they can put in these foods, if they make it completely devoid of nutrition, you will eat more of them.
Yeah, absolutely, because your body is seeking to reach its quota of protein and, potentially the micronutrients that are needed too. You got to think, just stop and think for a second. Everything that your body is made of comes from what you eat. Everything that your body builds on top of, that means when you're healing an injury, especially children who are developing and growing their brains, bodies, bones, all of these things for the first time, they're pulling nutrients from their food and trying to get enough of that. Your body is not worried about calories, really. Like innately, your body's not worried about calories, it's worried about nutrition. And once I believe that quota, so to speak, has been filled, all the kind of the lights go on in the body and say, okay, oh, we're good. Like we're done. Like we don't need more. But if your body's not getting what it needs, then regardless of how many calories you're consuming, your body is going to want you to eat more.
This is super important. So this goes back to the calorie counting thing, and goes back to everything that we're trying to do with this series, right? So like you said, I'm making the Food Lies series. That's why I'm here. I've interviewed over 300 doctors and scientists about this topic now. I've been full-time for 7 years. It's been a 10-year journey for me. And I'm just trying to put this all together into something people can understand easily. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, it'll be pretty apparent what we're talking about. So the main thing with the calorie paradigm is wrong is your body wants more of some type of calorie and less of another type of calorie. No one's talking about this, though. This is not put out in the mainstream, does not even put out in the nutrition circles, right? I'm friends with all the nutrition people you see on Instagram and YouTube. No one's talking about this specific concept. Your body wants more of one type of calorie and less of another type of calorie. And that's why it doesn't work when you arbitrarily cut calories, because you're cutting the good calories and you're cutting the bad calories. So it can work short term, but it won't work long term. So the food, like you said, your body is made of food. Your body doesn't care the name of your diet. The body doesn't care that you're paleo, you're keto, or vegan, or carnivore. Does not care. It cares about nutrients and it cares about energy, right? And nutrients are protein, vitamins, and minerals, and energy are fats and carbs mainly. So for all of history, we ate foods around us and we got the correct amount of nutrients and the correct amount of energy, right? That we need energy to get through the day. If you're eating too much energy, then what are you going to do? Store it. You store it on your body. Your body's very smart. And that's fat or visceral fat, right? So if you're eating too much energy to get you through more than you need through the day, then yes, you're going to gain weight and have metabolic problems. And if you're not getting enough nutrients, then your body's going to keep seeking food. So you're going to keep eating more. And that's what happens is you end up eating more energy. And they've proven this in not all animals, many animals, down to even grasshoppers and crickets, to mice, to humans, that animals eat to get a certain amount of protein and nutrients. And so there's a great study. These two scientists, doctors Robbenheimer and Simpson, they've been studying this for decades. And they gave two rodent groups different diets. One was their natural diet with the right amount of protein and whatever fats and carbs. Then they took that same food and diluted of protein, and they just put in extra fat and carbs. And the first group with the correct protein ate the correct amount, was the correct weight, had the correct offspring, and died at the normal time. The group that had the food with diluted protein ate more of it. And they did the calculations and they found that the amount that they ate more to get the same amount of protein, right? If the mouse needed 10 grams of protein, they ate 10 grams of protein from the other diluted diet. But to get that 10 grams of protein from the diluted food, they had to eat more food. They had to eat more empty calories, more of just extra fat and carbs. And this group had less offspring. They died earlier and they became obese. And it's so simple that this is what's happening with humans, is that if you're eating processed foods, if you're eating any of the modern diet, if you're eating the food pyramid, like me and my family were eating, whole grains, avoiding red meat, low fat products, what they're telling us to eat, that's actually a low nutrient, high energy diet, right? It's actually what, like the mouse group that got the diluted diet. So most foods are low in nutrients and high in energy, especially processed foods, right? You can look in the back of the labels. Look at the protein compared to the calorie content, right? So I talk about calories, but eating low in high calories, you're going to eat too much and you're going to gain weight long term. And so to reverse that, and what I do and how I eat now is now I eat high nutrient and correct amount of energy. You got to tip the scales. So now I'm eating meat, eggs, fish, some fermented vegetables, kimchi, sauerkraut. I eat pickles, I eat avocado, I eat fruit, I eat some raw dairy. Just simple foods, single ingredient foods. And if you eat those, you're getting the correct amount of nutrients. You're getting all the protein and vitamins and minerals you need, but you're not getting the excess energy. And that excess energy is just usually refined grains, seed oils, and added sugar. These are the three ingredients that are in all processed foods. And that's just what's making people fat and sick. It's really simple. I don't know if it's a little nerdy or complicated, or it's not very sexy to talk about this nutrient to energy stuff. And, it's really cool to just go on Instagram and, tell people to be carnivore and you can get a lot of followers, and it's it's carnivore is fine. It's a good intervention, but to learn about like what really is going to make you healthy long term, it's actually simple.
Eat nutrient dense whole foods.
That's it.
Yeah.
But then
So,
you got to know why. I mean,
yeah.
it's like a little more, but yeah.
No, of course. I mean, I think what you're saying is spot on. And I'll tell you what my diet looks like typically. No, I'm not a perfect person. Of course, sometimes I do eat, a cupcake at a party or things like that. But I have learned so much about nutrition. And again, I used to do what you used to do because I thought that was what was healthy. Like kind of avoided milk a little bit, avoided eggs, didn't eat a lot of red meat. It was, especially when I was in a training camp, it was chicken, broccoli, rice. Similar what you said, maybe a turkey sandwich for some carbs or something like that, get a little energy from that. Now my diet is eggs in the morning. I'll eat 4, maybe 6 eggs sometimes. I'll have some grass-fed raw cheese if possible with my eggs, a glass of raw milk. And then lunch, and usually I eat breakfast a little bit later in the day. I do practice a little bit of intermittent fasting. Lunch might look something like, a peach or an apple, with some meat, just some ground beef or maybe some yogurt. And then for dinner, it's like steak. Last night we had ground beef, we had purple potatoes, I had butter, sour cream, lots of salt, and a little bit of broccoli. And it was phenomenal. And I haven't eaten yet this morning and I still feel great. I feel like I'm satiated in these fats and proteins. My body's just thriving. My metabolism is going. And I have had a DEXA scan. I've also multiple DEXA scans. I've had resting metabolic rate. We call it an RMR test as an athlete. And my metabolism is very robust. Especially for my age, being in my mid-30s, you would expect that the natural progression is for the metabolism to slowly decline. I believe that that is a sign that the body is breaking, especially prematurely. I don't think that we are just meant to accept gaining weight and our bodies feeling bad. I still feel like I did in my 20s, and I feel great. And the tests that I have also surprise a lot of the scientists and experts that work at the UFC Performance Institute, because they're like, this is incredible, Misha. Like, your metabolism is better than the average 22-year-old female athlete. You are thriving and doing great. And you know what I realize is that I have to give my body what my body needs. If I give it what it asks for, it will give me what I ask for. And that means that when I need to lose weight and minimize my body fat for a temporary period of time, because again, I don't think it's great for women to be super lean for long periods of time. But the proof is in the pudding, right? My body has adapted so well, where I feel like metabolically I'm past the point where I may have started to see that decline and have trouble making weight now. We see this a lot in athletes as they mature or as they age. And I won't name, but I know of a particular athlete who did a lot of yo-yo dieting, right? So it would be like extreme calorie cut. And then as soon as they'd make weight, they would just eat everything under the sun, including a lot of processed food. And they began putting on weight around their organs, which meant that they had to pull more water and also were not as easily able to get rid of this weight with the current diet style, and began missing weight consistently. So these are things that I know on the back end as an athlete are very true. And I get to see this testing firsthand, and I get to talk with other athletes and people who are trying to do it right, who still a lot of times are very misguided in all of that. And I guess that's where I was going to go with this is even again, the professionals don't necessarily always follow what I think would be the best diet, which is just eating whole foods.
Your diet sounds flawless. That is exactly what I eat. I maybe eat it in a different combination, but so many people I know have done similar diets to this and feel amazing. They say they're never going back, and athletes as well. So yes, I think that the athletes get a little bit of bad info. Some of these trainers have the outdated info. This is kind of new stuff. I mean, we're learning live, right? There's people that we know in this new health world that this has only been like 5 years of
Well,
people
and
figuring this out. And this,
doctors
yeah,
too. I know that in your documentary, you have plenty top experts admitting that they get minimal nutritional training. It is not the common thought process to teach our doctors, who are ultimately responsible for a large majority of people's health. You know, you see the infomercials or the the little scripts, pre and
news
post
segments.
podcasts about,
Yeah.
like, please make sure to consult your doctor before you make dietary changes, or before you do this, or before you add that. But the problem is that doctors really aren't educated on nutrition in a comprehensive, I wouldn't even say close to comprehensive way. And so for them to give nutritional advice would be almost the equivalent of, like, I feel like my daughter could honestly, at 6 years old, probably tell more people how to eat healthy than a lot of doctors. And this isn't to criticize our doctors, because I believe that if you become a doctor, it's because you truly want to help people. That would be my belief.
Hmm.
Most doctors mean well, but it's the system that is broken and corrupt. And we could dive into, the monetary benefits behind teaching doctors to prescribe medication over prescribing health and change in the way that people might actually benefit from long term. There's not as much, it's not as lucrative to do that. Yeah, so your thoughts on
I
that?
would, yeah, I would 100% trust your daughter more than any doctor, mainstream doctors. I'm telling you, if someone was like, my mom needs help, I would say, yes, trust your daughter more than the standard doctors. And yes, it's about 0.1% of their curriculum is about nutrition. And yes, you've seen episode 1, Food Lies. It's private screening right now, but all the doctors say they were not trained in nutrition or had about 4 hours. And they do this for a reason. So yeah, if you want to go back in history, there was a paradigm that was about root cause and actual health, and doctors used to be pretty much get paid to keep you well. Right now, doctors are paid for procedures and to mask symptoms, right? Pills and procedures. And this system was set up this way. So after looking at this stuff for the last 10 years, now I know why it's like this. And the medical system is this. And they're there to make profits. And in the middle of the 1900s, it actually was shifted to this model. So before, there were actually doctors doing real medicine and trying to keep people well and changing people's diets and lifestyles. And then some different big families that you may have heard of, some of these famous people and families that kind of control systems at a high level, especially some of these medical systems, realized that there's a lot of profit in pills and procedures. And they actually invented the word quack. It was a PR move to discredit doctors that were doing real medicine, who were doing real root cause, diet and lifestyle stuff. So if you were doing that, you're considered a quack. And so they pushed everyone, then they pushed the medical schools. So they funded all these medical schools, right? They're still funding these medical schools to teach the curriculum of just how to identify disease and then what to prescribe for that. And it makes sense too. I mean, I have my good friend and business partner, doctor. He does not get paid to try to change people's diet. He actually would lose money, because every minute that he's talking to them about changing their diet, he's not seeing other patients or making money for doing, just to try to even pay his medical bills off, medical school bills, and the lease of his office. So it's hard, right? It's hard to get this information out there if you're actually losing money trying to do it.
Yeah, that's another big problem, I feel like. And the doctors who do understand the nutrition aspect of it, I feel like, have had to go out and heavily self-educate. And it is extremely difficult to be making money in this way, because the insurance model also doesn't support it. And most people want to go see a doctor with their insurance that they're provided through work, but then the insurance dictates what type of doctor and quality of service that you get. This is why I don't have health care, because I don't think it's health care. I believe it's sick care. And I'm paying for some doctor to maybe give me a prescription. And I don't go to see the doctor really. I would see a doctor in the case of injury. I would see the doctor in that case, but I would not go to see a standard, typical doctor to give me advice about health. And although I am no doctor, I like you, am very passionate, and I do talk to people who are smarter than me, who have studied these things, who give me what I feel like is genuine, insightful information about health and wellness and longevity, but they didn't learn it in medical school. I think it was Callie Means and Casey Means. So I think it was actually Casey. She's the sister to Callie and graduated top in her class, I believe from Stanford medical, number one in her class. She's incredible. And she's like, I learned none of this stuff, the stuff that we're talking about. And she goes beyond that. She really talks about food dyes and preservatives and pesticides and all of these things. But she didn't learn about that stuff in medical school. She's had to go out and read independent studies and try to educate similarly to how you and I are doing, and try to get the word out there about the truth.
They're great. Yeah, they're both in my series. Yeah, Callie was just here in Austin last week, and we did an event with him. But yeah, they're kind of blowing the whistle on this all and speaking out in a big way. And I'm glad there's this new movement of people talking about it. This is turning into it's like a groundswell, right? Where people realize you can't trust your doctors. I don't have a doctor either. Yeah, like you, I would never pay for the insurance. It just makes no sense. I don't see doctors. I can get all the information I need online. I just learn myself. I have a pile of books behind me.
And that's going to make you sound crazy. That's going to make you sound crazy, and it's going to make me sound crazy. People are going to say, how in the world am I going to listen to somebody who wouldn't put money aside for health insurance? Well, I'll tell you what, it's because I can be healthier by taking that money and investing it in my food and in boosting my own immune system, taking my own thought, my food sovereignty back into my hands, who I know I can trust. Like, I want the best for my kids. I want the best for me. So I'm taking that information and I'm taking that money and I'm putting it towards supporting the small local ranchers that it costs more for their beef because they're doing it the right way. It's not factory farmed. And there's like 5,000 times the amount of phytonutrients in a pound of grass-fed, regeneratively raised piece of meat, beef, than there is from something you'd get like McDonald's. I wouldn't even consider that really beef. So yes, if you're in a financial position where you cannot afford grass-fed beef, which I think is so unfortunate, I think that should be affordable for every single person. But if you can't, I would still suggest going with a generic beef over processed foods. Don't go for the top ramen. Don't go for the hamburger helper. No, just get yourself some ground beef, regardless of if it's grass-fed or not, because you're still going to be on a much better track, I think, by eating something. And I've heard you talk about this before, the ability for cows to upcycle food and turn it into something really nutritionally dense for people.
Yeah. And it's so weird that cows are getting such a bad rap. They help the environment and they help you, and they do a very necessary job, and it's a miracle, really. They take low quality nutrition that we can't eat, grasses and forages, and they turn it into high quality beef, complete and bioavailable protein that is super healthy for us. And I say it's weird, but I think I kind of know why they get such a bad rap is because for all the processed foods to be good, natural foods and natural fats like beef, saturated fat from beef and eggs has to be bad, right? So I get that they have to just flip the script on us and just go against nature. That cows are miracles. They actually upcycle the protein, so they actually give us more protein, better protein than what they consume. So there's a lot of vegan myths out there that, why don't we just eat the crops? We can just eat all these crops and skip the middleman. And the truth is that cattle and other ruminant animals, lambs and and bison. These are very important middlemen. Yes, they upcycle nutrients. They take things that are, again, inedible, and even just waste products from like corn and wheat. They're making ethanol. They can make biofuels, or they're making whatever they're making. Brewers, they even take leftover beer byproducts and they can feed them to cows. It's not the best way to do it, but they upcycle it into high quality nutrition that humans need. And I do agree with you too. Always go for the grass fed and finished, the best stuff you can, the local stuff. But if you can't afford it, it's still normal beef is still better than any other processed food or any, even any plant food, right? It's good quality nutrition. And one more thing to wrap up, there's my friend Dr. Stefan von Vliet. He's doing those tests to show that there's so many more nutrients and phytonutrients and secondary compounds in grass-fed and regeneratively grown beef. So they are doing this science with mass spectrometry. And people can look up Dr. Stefan von Vliet and his studies, and it's really amazing that he's proving how healthy it is when you get an animal, leave it on pasture, rotate it, move it around. It actually helps the environment. It actually puts carbon back in the soil. It's actually makes the soil soak up more water. So if there's floods, it doesn't just run off and get all the soil into the rivers. It actually makes it healthy, makes it more nutrient dense so that we can grow better crops that can be more nutrient dense. So yeah, really these ruminant animals are miracles that have been evolving and co-evolving with the grasslands and with humans forever.
Well, if you think about it too, I understand that the way these animals, horses too, can extract protein from grass, we cannot do that. We can't just go out on a field of grass and eat a bunch of grass and put on muscle because the bioavailability isn't there. Our teeth are different. For one, they have those flat teeth, so they really crush that down. And then cows have 4 stomachs. That's how they're extracting and really digesting, because this is the food that they were meant to eat. So let's move into that a little bit. The food that we were meant to eat as people. I know you talk about that in the documentary, and I think one of the most fascinating things was the evolution of our brain size and the correlation of the time that we really started going from gatherers to like hunter-gatherers, and the meat that we started to eat. And how that influenced, the size of our brain. And I also know that there's a study you've talked about before, height and health. So maybe if you can kind of navigate that however you want, but I think these are really important points.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're right that there's a lot of vegan propaganda. I see these jokes. They're just like, oh, the gorilla, they're eating nothing but plants, and look how strong they are. Even the Game Changers film, it's like, I want to be healthy as an ox, and the ox doesn't eat meat. It doesn't make any sense. These are completely different animals, and we have completely different digestive systems. So in episode 1 of Food Lies, we go through the history of humans and why we require nutrient-dense nutrition from animals, right? And we can't just go back. This is a quote from one of the scientists. We can't go back and just eat like our ancestors. We can't just go back and eat leaves all day. We would not get enough nutrition. And you can see actually these raw vegans, they're slowly deteriorating. Like they are wasting away because our bodies need the nutrition from animal products, and our guts have changed. Our brains have changed because of this. So we do the whole timeline in episode 1. We have a section that's about 14 minutes that goes from our most distant ancestors that were eating plants all day, right? But we've changed. Our guts have gotten way bigger. So our small intestine is where we get the high quality, we digest the meats and cooked foods, and that has gotten a lot bigger. And then the large intestines have gotten smaller, and the large intestine is where the plants would ferment and would get nutrition from them. So that shows that we've moved away from our ancestors that were eating plants to eating animals, because that's how these changes took place, right? It's called the expensive tissue hypothesis. Very expensive to build a big brain, right? It's very hard. It takes a lot. And it's also, you can see the changes in the anatomy where if your small intestine is changing in size and your large intestine is changing in size over millions of years, there is a very strong reason for that to happen, right? And that happened because we got access to animal foods, and we started hunting, and we started getting first access to the kill. So this is another thing Dr. Bill Schindler talks about in the film, is that in the beginning we were just scavenging, right? And we were getting what meat we could get. There was carcasses, and we would come and get what we could, but the predators, the lions or these big animals, would take all the good meat first, the organs and all the good meat, and we were left with what we could get. But so we did start, our brains started growing, and we started becoming more human. But then what really changed when our brains really doubled in size and we really skyrocketed in becoming human was when we had first access, when we learned to hunt. And then by doing that, we could get first access to the animal, and we could get the most nutrient dense part. We could get the blood, the organs, the liver. People know this now, that how healthy liver is. Well, I went to Africa and hunted with the hunter gatherers, and the first thing they did is they killed an animal and they opened it up and we ate the liver raw. And they're amazed that I ate it. But they know this. They don't know about nutrition science. They don't know how many B vitamins and iron and copper and amazing nutrition is in liver. But they did know that it was healthy and it was important, and they would share it around with people. And it's
Yeah,
really
they
amazing.
didn't need a double-blind study to tell them that the liver was beneficial.
They didn't. And a side story is Weston Price. Dr. Weston A. Price went around the world 100 years ago, and he studied all of these populations that were super healthy, amazing teeth, strong jaws, big. They have all their teeth. We just our health is so poor that it can't even support our jaw growth and development. And I had braces. I had all these teeth removed. So Dr. Weston Price was a dentist, went around the world 100 years ago and found all these people who still had all their teeth intact, that were way healthier than us. And what they all did is completely separate cultures, right? He went the top of the Swiss Alps to Micronesia to Africa to New Zealand, Australia, and he found all these separate populations. I'm talking 100 years ago, when they still didn't have access to trade yet. They were eating their natural foods. They would all eat the organs and the grass-fed dairy and seafood and eggs, all these things around pregnancy too. They knew how to raise healthy children, and they didn't have the double-blind placebo-controlled trials. They just knew that if people are eating more of these animal products with the most nutrition, they have healthier babies, and the children would grow up bigger and stronger and taller. And they just knew this because humans are smart. Even though we didn't have modern technology back then, we focused all of our intelligence on growing healthy humans, surviving, hunting, all of these practices to maintain our health and build the next generation of health. So this is so obvious when you look at all these different things. We can look at modern science and we can get some of the information, right? We do have modern science telling us that yes, liver has tons and tons of vitamins and minerals, but we're never going to get all of the evidence from modern science of what's the perfect diet, because you can't do that study. We've done some studies, and you could, replace one fat with another fat and see how they do over time. But we don't even know if they're adhering to that diet or actually doing it. They can do short-term studies where they put people in a metabolic ward and they actually control what they eat. And those are, 2 weeks at most usually, because it's very expensive and you have to lock people away and measure everything. So, it's really hard to know what is the good diet. What is the human diet? What are we supposed to eat? How do we thrive? And so you have to look at all these different lines of evidence that we're talking about in the series and talking about right now. Is humans for all of history knew. We knew what we needed, and it was through trial and error, and it was just simple observations, and it was through the ingenuity of Homo sapiens that we saw this family, they were eating a lot of meat, or they went for the organs, and this family, they were just eating tubers. Maybe they were just eating fruit and honey and tubers. Well, one family was a lot taller, healthier, stronger, didn't get sick, right? So they could just do simple observations and understand that we need more of one food and less of another. And so I'll try to wrap things back around, right? So I'm in the ultimate quest of what is the diet to thrive? Like, what is the ultimate way of eating that can, make humans the healthiest, to not get sick? I don't get sick anymore once I started eating this way. People don't even get it. The calorie counting people, they don't understand that this stuff happens. I'm like, well, if you have proper nutrition, it goes beyond just your waistline and just your, body fat percentage. It goes into your immune system. It goes into, how you can avoid sickness. So the ultimate goal is to find the way of eating that you will thrive. That I want to live to 100 or more, but I don't want to be in a wheelchair. I don't want to be decrepit. I want to have the full health that from what I've seen our ancestors had, right? They had full robust health until they died, pretty much. They did not just decline and be in a wheelchair, stuff like that. They wouldn't have made it. And so you have to look at all the lines of evidence. So we started talking about the gut and how it's changed and how our brains grew. You have to look at different populations and what they eat. You have to look at modern nutrition science. Well, now we can use mass spectrometry, like I mentioned, and look at what's in the different foods on a cellular level. You have to look at case studies, trials. Yes, let's look at all the modern clinical trials, but we also have to look back to see what else was done, right? Humans are smart. We've declined even since agriculture. 12,000 years ago, you could look at the remains of a human and they were taller, bigger brains, and less disease. And there's a kind of a line in the sand when we started having agriculture. And Dr. Bill Schindler talks about this. I've done many podcasts with him. He's in the film. After agriculture, shorter, less, smaller brain, and more disease. And it's just because we changed. Basically, we got less nutrition. Crops helped us support more citizens, right? We could have bigger populations, but it was at the expense of nutrients. So the diet, I was talking about the nutrient to energy ratio of a diet. If you're eating a whole bunch of grains, you can feed a lot of people. That's a lot of calories, but it's less nutrition. That's less nutrients and more energy, right? So yeah, is this making sense?
It is. And while I don't want to poo-poo science, I did kind of make a little bit of a joke earlier. I also really want to promote people thinking for themselves. We have lost sight of what it means to use our own brains, our God-gifted brains and common sense, right? So although science is so fascinating, and I love reading a great study and understanding the value of science being able to prove something, I also think that we have become disconnected with our own intuition. And that goes everything from parents to healthy eating to diet and exercise. We just forget how to trust ourselves in this process. And I have to say that I think as more people become awake to the food and how unhealthy it is, the more we have to sit back and say, okay, not all the science can be trusted either. There's plenty of terrible studies out there. There are studies that are funded in a way that makes them biased. It withholds information. So not all science is equal. I actually have a friend of mine, Tyler LeBaron, who has been a guest on this podcast as well, he's a molecular scientist, so he understands molecular hydrogen on a whole other level. But he also has a project called Bad Science, and it really kind of helps people who are not formally educated to read studies and understand what a good study is and what a not so good study is, or what a terrible study is, and how to kind of look into those sources of who is funding those. And it brings me to another point about the vegan documentaries. I think that everybody is different. Okay, so I am. Maybe there are some people out there who haven't evolved quite as much as some of us, and maybe they do better or okay with more plant-based diets. I cannot sit here and say that it doesn't work for anybody. But what I believe is that particularly red meat is more bioavailable for us. And this also comes from a place that I also tried to be a vegetarian for a while. I didn't ultimately feel my best. It was okay, but I tried to actually, unfortunately, do this when I was pregnant with my son. I was living in Singapore, and I don't like the maltreatment of animals. I'm a big animal lover, and I think that animals were here to feed us, but I think it's very important that we raise them and treat them ethically, that we try to make the process of slaughter, and I even hate that word. I think it should be a kind and gentle and humane process as possible. And I think that they should also have great lives where they thrive and are happy and live well, because I also think hormonally those animals, when they're depressed or sad or eating bad things, that passes along to the food that we eat. So it's like paying it forward as this animal pays it back to us, in their transition from, life to food. But when I was not eating as much meat, because in Singapore it was very difficult to find, actually I couldn't find meat that I knew was ethically raised. So I kind of got a little perturbed by that, and I said, I think I'm going to try this. I didn't really have much knowledge otherwise. So I did, and I ended up getting pretty iron deficient. I was chewing ice a lot. I started looking into why I was, just craving ice all the time. I also was craving a lot more sweets. And I understand that if you're not getting enough protein, again, your body can seek it out in energy that's not the best, right? So, so I didn't do it for the entire pregnancy because it just didn't feel well doing it. Luckily, it was my second pregnancy, so I could tell the difference. But what I would say, though, is that I know there are people out there who are vegetarian or vegan, and I don't know if you guys are still listening to this because you might have already turned off. But just maybe hear it out, the thought process behind this, the comprehensive science behind this, and then just maybe our common thought in all of this. Do you think that there is enough meat, to feed globally, or even just inside the U.S., because this is an argument from vegans and vegetarians that there's just not enough. There's not enough placement. We can't have enough cows. I don't believe any of the cow fart theory that it's causing, you mean there's like millions and billions of people who drive cars every single day, but we're going to talk about cows that have been here for millions and millions of years. That logic doesn't add up to me. However, it is an honest debate whether we could effectively feed an entire nation with cows and meat. And if so, how would we go about it?
Yeah, I think we absolutely can. And there are people that have done the math, and we absolutely have enough land. And cows on grass are good for the land. There's a lot of vegan propaganda that's saying, oh, well, 2/3 of the land of this type of land is used for cattle. And I'm saying, yes, that's good. That's good. For one thing, the land can't be used for crops. Most land that cattle is on is because we can't grow crops on that land. It's too rocky, or there's hills, or there's trees. And also, when cows are on land, they actually are helping it. Like I was talking about before, it helps the soil. They're putting carbon back in the soil. Their manure is feeding the soil. Even them chewing on the grass, it is helping. It's helping stimulate growth, and they're pruning it down. If you graze animals properly and you graze the land properly, they're eating the right amounts, and then they're leaving that land and coming back again when it's time to eat them again. And it's a very symbiotic, it's a harmonious cycle that works. And yes, don't believe the cow farts or the belches. That is absolutely not true. They're just taking carbon that's already from the sun, and that's methane, and it's just this short harmonious cycle where they're eating it, they are belching some of it out, and then it's a short half-life, and it comes back down into the grass. It's this little circle that goes above ground that's always happened. And we're talking about fossil fuels. We're talking about the real problem. We're digging carbon up from deep in the ground and then burning it and putting it up in the atmosphere, right? So if there is a problem with carbon, it's that. It's not the lowly animals just doing the cycle that they've always done. So yeah, there's more science on that you can watch. We can't go into all that now, but animals are helping, right? Properly raised ruminant animals are helping the grass. It's good that they're on land. There is enough land. If anyone's taken a flight in their life and looked out the window over the U.S., there is a lot of land. There are millions and millions of acres, and that can be used, and it would actually help the land. And yeah, maybe we have to stop growing so much corn, wheat, and soy. right? Government subsidizes all these cheap crops and that make up all these processed foods. And so you're
Oh, so it's
asking the
profitable.
solution. Oh, huge money in that. So the solution you're asking about is going to be slow, but we're going to have to slowly stop growing and subsidizing all the corn, wheat, and soy and these just super cheap, super profitable crops and start grazing more animals properly on land. And there's definitely enough room. There's millions and millions of acres, and these are much healthier calories for people than the empty calories from the corn, wheat, and soy. And I need to respond to your point too about the vegans and vegetarians. I mean, I respect anyone who's changing their diet and wants to be healthy. And I think that's great. And anyone eating more whole foods, that's absolutely great. But I know, and I know they have benefits, because if you're doing anything that's going to go more towards whole foods and it's going to allow you to lose weight, that's a good thing. So yes, many people can have great benefits from going vegan or vegetarian because they're losing a lot of fat, and especially visceral fat, and they're getting their metabolism back. And that's great. That doesn't mean it's a diet for humans, and it doesn't mean it's our optimal diet. It means that, for short periods of time, even 10 years, 5 years, maybe, well, I don't say vegan, vegetarian. You could go vegetarian for most of your life if you're doing it properly, and you can be okay. But that doesn't mean that it's optimal. And from all the lines of evidence, this is why we're talking about how the digestive system changed, talking about all this history of humans and how we've learned to eat. And even nutrition science, it's very clear that red meat and other animal protein is far more bioavailable and complete than plant protein. So this is not up for debate. This is just super well-known basic science. They actually base the scales on animal protein, right? They set the protein availability scale based on like dairy and eggs and animal food, and it goes down from there, right? So the animal products are all the highest bioavailability and completeness, and then it goes down, and the plant foods are near the bottom. So we know it's not like we're not trusting science. It's just no one's putting out this information in the mainstream because it goes against all the narratives. So
Why do you think there are so many narratives in this? The vegan and vegetarian documentaries, like I have yet to see a meat-led documentary. Now, I know I'm looking forward to Food Lies. And look, this is not meant to be a war of vegetarians versus carnivores. Like, I just think that both sides deserve a fair explanation and shake, and really looking comprehensively at our biology and the science. And I also think if we had no science, no TV, if we go back to those hunter-gatherer days, you cannot tell me that an uncooked piece of dill pickle plant is going to taste better or be more sustainable than meat would have been, or even to our liking and our taste. Now, even if you don't eat meat, I'm telling anybody who does eat meat will always, hands down, prefer a bite of steak with some nice salt and butter on it than even like vegetables under the same circumstance. And especially if you make them completely plain, vegetables can be a bit like, you kind of need something to make them taste better. So I think our taste buds were meant to lead us in our diet as well. That's why fruit is something that's a high commodity, right? I think fruit is good for us. Another reason why I'm not pro carnivore diet long term, I think, again, it can be a great metabolic reset, but especially for women, I think we definitely need some variations in our blood sugar due to our hormone changes throughout a cycle. So I think fruit is great to have in there. And I think vegetables in part, can be a great additive, maybe some fiber, there's some things in them. But vegetables also can't run away from us. So I think that they also were designed to cellularly bother insects. And so I don't think having a large dose of vegetables is probably great. What do they say? It's the dose that makes the poison. So this is just my general anecdotal thoughts on everything. But did you ever try veganism, vegetarianism before any of this? And kind of your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. So many good points there. And we could have delve into each one of those. And I know we're not going to have time to do it, but this is sort of like a jumping off point, hopefully, for people. And there's so much content out there around, yes, the vegetables can have anti-nutrients a lot. I actually had a problem with spinach. I ate way too much spinach, so much oxalates in spinach. And you could get kidney problems. A lot of vegans get kidney stones from too many oxalates. So yes, plants are trying to protect themselves. Fruit is not. Fruit wants to get its seed spread. And yes, I think women should be eating more carbs and more fruit from whole food sources, and especially around their cycle. Uh, there's so many. What other topics I want to run back through? What was the other ones you said?
We were talking about
Oh, how do I eat? Oh, also me vegetarian.
yes.
Okay, so I never was vegetarian. I always instinctually knew that meat was healthy, and I wouldn't eat a meal without meat. I was just more into the food pyramid, right? So I was doing the whole grains and all that stuff. But yes, basically I'm in this animal-based crowd where I'm not carnivore. I've never been carnivore. I mean, I tried it for a couple of weeks just for fun. But this animal-based crowd, which is really just a general group of people that aren't plant-based, we basically collect the plant-based people that it always seems that it's a one-way street, right? That they try the plant-based route and then they come to animal-based and no one goes back. And you're talking about instincts. I know even family members that are vegetarian back in Hawaii. I'm from Hawaii. They grew up vegetarian, or they got indoctrinated in the 60s and 70s, but they still on Christmas, what do they want? Prime rib. They want meat. I ask them. It's so funny because they have this cognitive dissonance, and I'm talking about this stuff, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know," and they're like, "Oh, what did you have on your birthday?" They're like, "Oh, a steak." It's like people know, and deep down they know that it's health. They like it. They just think it's not healthy. They've been indoctrinated into thinking it's not healthy, and so yeah, we didn't get into the height and health stuff, but I'll quickly try to talk about this stuff. Is the other reasons why we know that meat is healthy and that the more animal-based side is better. Because yes, you can, short term, you can feel better eating vegetarian maybe in the short term because you're cleaning up your diet and you're losing weight and it's great. But what I really am interested in is long term, right? Let's look at population level data, or let's look at throughout all of history. That's why I'm talking about 12,000 years ago. You can see the skeletal changes and brain size changes that went down and got worse from adopting agriculture, right? This is what we can really help us learn about what's the optimum diet, and how a population's height changes is a good indication of if they're getting proper nutrition. So there's great studies showing that if you aren't getting enough meat, all the countries getting the least amount of animal foods are the shortest, and they actually have stunted growth in children. So there's a great study I can send that just shows it graphically that this is all the people not getting enough meat.
So I think of like the Philippines. I've been there and they're very tiny people. So would that be?
Yes, exactly. All places in Africa, all these places where they're not getting enough meat, stunted growth and shorter. And then there's a different study. They looked at 105 countries and male height. And then they did another study later, I think it was 140 countries with male and female, and looked at population level data. I'm not talking about like individual data. Like just because you're taller than your friend doesn't mean you're healthier than your friends.
Right.
Right. There's definitely genetic components to this, but also where did those genetics come from? Right. I'll get into that in a second. But if you're looking at population level data, the countries that eat the most animal protein get the most, and they talk about in the study that they are healthier and taller. It's very directly correlated. It's a linear correlation. You can look at a graph and it's just up and to the right. They get more animal protein. They are taller as a population. And so you're up in the north, these Nordic countries, the tallest in the world, they eat the most meat. You're down by the equator, lowest amount of meat, a lot of, rice and vegetables, not as tall. And so people say, yeah, but it's genetic. Well, where did these genetics come from? Right? Like we were all Homo sapiens, right? We all came from the same type of person. We were all, even as recent as 70,000 years ago, I learned about the Toba constriction event. There was I think a meteor or some impact that wiped out most of the population. We're down to only a few thousand humans on Earth. And this was 70,000 years ago. So 70,000 years ago, we were all come from sort of a common ancestor. And that's only a couple thousand generations. So in a couple thousand generations, we've become the diverse species that we have today. Some people are tall, some people are short. Not saying that there's necessarily anything better or worse about being tall or short, but it is a sign of nutrition. And so all of the populations in the north that eat more meat have become genetically taller at a population level. And at the people
What
around
about
the,
the Kenyans,
Southeast
though? I
Asia.
think of like Kenyans as like tall and thin. Are they not actually that tall? Are they just really thin?
Oh, they're super tall, but
Okay, they eat a lot of
they're
meat.
eating blood. They're very,
Oh,
they, for most of history, they've been animal
goats?
based. I went there. Tanzania and Kenya, that area is where the Hadza and the Maasai live. And the Maasai, super tall. Their diet, the men for most of their life, is blood and milk and meat. That's all
Okay.
they eat. And I drank the blood and the milk with them. It was crazy. And yeah, these people, yes. So we're talking about thousands of generations. If populations could get animal nutrition, they are taller. And if they're Southeast Asia, yes, they're eating a lot of seafood. They're getting what they can, but they just generally their diet is more focused around rice and vegetables, and because that's what they have available and that's cheap, and they've just become shorter. And I'm sure there's more factors than just their diet, but really the scientists agree that diet and your environment and your diet dictate your genetics, right? This over thousands of generations.
Yeah, and well, in closing here, if you think about it, this is not an argument that there is more nutrition in a piece of beef or any kind of meat than there is rice. So let's just leave it there. With that being said, Brian, thank you so much for being a guest today. And is there anything that you would like to, let people know how to follow you, or any potential timeline for this docuseries? It's going to be 6 episodes. Is that correct? Anything else the listeners might want to leave here knowing about you and what you have on the docket?
Yeah. Well, just follow me on Food Lies. The docu-series is called Food Lies. We just got some great news with some producers and some stuff going on to help get it out there sooner, but it will be next year. You can follow me at Food Lies on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, YouTube. And then also Nose to Tail. We're talking about regenerative ag and all this stuff. I'm very interested in healthy animals, and I don't want to eat factory farm meat. So I started a company around it. So it's called Nose to Tail, and we make products. We stopped selling meat. Actually, it's not a good business. I realize how the world works is that it runs on processed foods because they have a high profit margin. And when you're selling meat, there's not a lot of profit margin. So it's hard to have a business. It's really interesting. I'm like, oh, that's why the world is the way it is. So
Oh, that's unfortunate.
it is. Yeah, there's no profit margin. There's no ranchers, whether they're growing plants or animals. There's no ranchers getting rich, right? It's the companies that process the foods, put them in packages, sell them for 100 times what they're worth, right? A box of cereal is like 5 cents a cereal, and they charge $5. It's insane.
And here comes the motivation to shift people away from meat because they can make more money, right?
That's it. That's 100% it. But yeah, Nose to Tail, we do some product. We do beef tallow body care. We make some, other products, biltong products like dried meat, stuff like that. So yeah, check us out and get ready for Food Lies.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks, and have a great day. I appreciate you being here today.
Oh, thanks so much. This is awesome.